The alien woman trusted the human man, but he turned out to be betrayal itself. The first time he met her was in the half-collapsed docking ring of an old space station that drifted in lazy circles around a dying star. The station's lights flickered like drunk fireflies, and the gravity generator had long since given up on consistency, which meant every third step turned into an awkward float. He stumbled, arms flailing, colliding with a row of vending machines that all seemed to sell the same suspicious packet labeled simply nutrient goo. The sound he made was somewhere between a yelp and an apology to the universe. She was standing there, watching him with an expression that was equal parts confusion and quiet amusement. Tall, graceful, almost human, except for the ears. They were long, tapering upward, giving her a silhouette that reminded him of ancient paintings of elves, though she looked nothing like the frail figures from old Earth myths. Her ears twitched when she laughed, and she laughed when he pulled himself free of a vending machine that had tried to eat his sleeve. "You wrestle with food dispensers for sport?" she asked, her voice carrying a strange melodic accent, as if every word carried two meanings. "It's a human tradition," he said, brushing dust off his jacket. "We like to prove dominance over inanimate objects. Sometimes they win." Her glowing eyes narrowed with curiosity. They weren't glowing much, just a faint shimmer, like embers beneath ash. Later, he would learn they brightened when she was overwhelmed with emotion. For now, he only knew he'd never seen eyes that seemed so alive. They ended up talking for hours in that broken station. He offered her a seat on a crate that wobbled like it was drunk too, and she sat with the calm poise of someone who could turn collapsing ruins into a throne room. He told her stories of Earth, half true, half exaggerated, about cities built so tall their tops disappeared into clouds, oceans so wide they swallowed horizons, and sports where people chased balls for hours without once firing a plasma cannon. She listened intently, ears angled toward him, occasionally asking questions that made him realize she didn't just want to know about Earth. She wanted to know about him. She told him her name, though it was made of sounds his human tongue couldn't quite shape. She gave him a shorter version to use, one that still hummed with alien rhythm. She explained, cautiously, that she carried knowledge important to her people, knowledge others would kill for. He joked that most people would kill just for the vending machine goo if they were hungry enough. She laughed, a genuine sound that startled him with its warmth. They left the station together when the alarms began wailing a warning about imminent reactor failure. He offered her a spot on his patched-up freighter, a ship that creaked in protest whenever it had to accelerate faster than a lazy jog. She agreed without hesitation, as though she had already decided to trust him. Their first journey together was a series of mishaps strung together by unlikely luck. The freighter's NAV system kept trying to reroute them to tourist traps that no longer existed, insisting they visit scenic Supernova Point or historic wormhole exhibit, both of which would have ended in vaporization. At one point, the air recycler coughed out a smell so foul that he accused her of smuggling alien livestock aboard, which led to her laughing so hard she nearly fell out of her seat. She countered by claiming humans were the only species in the galaxy capable of poisoning themselves with their own cooking, which he had to admit was true. Despite the chaos, there was a strange comfort in having her there. She would sit in the co-pilot's chair, her long ears flicking whenever the ship made a noise she didn't trust, her glowing eyes scanning the stars as though she were searching for patterns he could never see. Sometimes she asked about his past, and he deflected with jokes, but she didn't press. Other times, she shared fragments of her own world, skies filled with twin moons, cities carved into mountains that sang with the wind, rituals where stories were woven into living patterns of light. She never revealed too much, careful with her words, but even those fragments were enough to leave him spellbound. When they stopped at a trading hub on the edge of the Cashin Belt, he watched as she navigated the crowds of aliens with a calm authority that made him realize she had spent her life being more than just herself. People noticed her, they always did. Some stared at her ears, others at her eyes, but all of them seemed to sense there was something valuable about her, something beyond the surface. He noticed too, though what struck him most wasn't her secrets or her importance. It was the way she laughed when he accidentally ordered a plate of live grubs because he couldn't read the menu. He told himself that traveling with her was temporary. He told himself he was just giving her safe passage, nothing more. But late at night, when the ship drifted through quiet space, and the stars stretched out like endless possibilities, he caught himself watching the faint glow of her eyes reflected in the viewport. And in those moments, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, something dangerously close to belonging. What he didn't tell her, not yet, was that others were watching too. The secrets she carried weren't just important, they were priceless. And though he laughed with her, though he shared stories and misadventures, a part of him already wrestled with the temptation of what her trust was worth to the galaxy. For now, he ignored it. For now, it was easier to smile, to joke about faulty vending machines and broken air recyclers, to pretend that he could be the kind of man she believed him to be. But deep down, he knew pretending never lasted forever. The freighter groaned awake like it resented the idea of moving, its engines coughing out a noise suspiciously similar to a smoker clearing his throat. He smacked the console, not gently, and the ship's lights flickered into reluctant life. She sat beside him in the co-pilot's chair, her long ears tilted back in faint disapproval. "Does your ship always sound like it's dying?" she asked. "It's not dying," he said, adjusting a lever that squealed in protest. "It's just expressing its personality. Some ships purr. Mine prefers dramatic gasps." The NAV system chirped with artificial cheer, announcing that they were on course for the Saran trade spire. He winced, remembering the last time he'd been there and how it had ended with a very large security officer chasing him through a very small ventilation duct. She noticed his hesitation and raised an eyebrow. "You have enemies there." "Enemies is a strong word," he said, flipping a switch that turned on the external shields with all the grace of a dying walrus. "Let's call them admirers who misunderstand my charm." She gave him a look that suggested she wasn't buying it, but she didn't press. Instead, she leaned back, ears twitching to the rhythm of the ship's uneven hum, as if she were listening to some secret pattern hidden in the noise. He tried not to stare at her too much, though it was difficult not to. The glow in her eyes had been brighter lately, and he wasn't sure if that meant she was amused, suspicious, or quietly plotting his murder. The Saran trade spire came into view hours later, rising like a jagged blade of metal and glass against the black of space. Dozens of smaller ships orbited around it, some sleek and fast, others cobbled together like his own. The docking procedure was an ordeal, mostly because the station's automated voice system kept mispronouncing his ship's name. "Freighter Mistral Runner, you are cleared to dock," the system repeated, except it kept calling it the Mr. Al Runner. "Your station has terrible manners," she said. He threw up his hands. "Tell me about it." Last time they called it the mucus roller. They docked with only 2 minor collisions, both with cargo drones that were apparently programmed to play chicken. When they finally stepped into the bustling corridors of the spire, the human felt that familiar rush of chaos. Merchants shouting in half a dozen languages, holographic ads projecting directly into people's faces, and the ever-present smell of fried something. She walked with calm dignity through the crowd, and it made people move aside without even realizing why. He, on the other hand, kept bumping into food carts, apologizing to a 3-eyed vendor whose sizzling snacks almost ignited his jacket. They found a cantina tucked into the side of the promenade, its walls plastered with neon signs warning patrons not to feed the bar droids or ask about the owner's 3rd divorce. They sat in a booth that wobbled like it was held together by duct tape and desperation. A waiter bot rolled up, its voice glitching between politeness and static. "What can I, BZT, get you fine organics today?" She ordered something with a name that made his ears hurt just to hear it. The bot turned to him expectantly, and he panicked. "I'll have whatever doesn't move," he said. Moments later, the bot returned with her drink, which shimmered with inner light, and his, which looked like someone had liquefied a tire. He poked it with a straw. It poked back. She smirked, sipping her glowing beverage with unbothered elegance. "You humans and your strange culinary bravery." "Bravery," he said. "This is survival instinct. I think it's staring at me." They shared that strange kind of laughter born of exhaustion and absurdity, the kind that carried them through the next hour of trade negotiations with a merchant who tried to sell them counterfeit star maps. She pointed out the errors immediately, her ears flicking in annoyance, while he just smiled and asked if the maps came with a free toaster. Later, as they made their way back to the freighter with supplies, he noticed how people stared at her, not just because of her long ears or the faint glow in her eyes, but because there was something about her presence that commanded attention. He also noticed a group of shadowy figures watching from the far side of the corridor, their movements too deliberate to be casual. He said nothing, but the weight of it settled in his stomach like bad food. On board again, she stored the supplies, while he pretended to fix the ship's communication relay. He kept glancing at her, wondering how much she suspected, if she knew her secrets were worth more than any cargo in the galaxy. The thought gnawed at him, tempting and terrifying in equal measure. She caught him staring and raised a brow. "You're quiet. Unusual for you." He fumbled for an excuse. "Just thinking about how you still owe me for saving you from the vending machine that tried to eat your cloak." Her ears twitched. "You were the one stuck. I saved you." "That's not how I remember it." They both laughed, and for a moment the shadows outside, the whispers of betrayal, all faded into nothing but the sound of her laughter filling the ship's worn-out cabin. For now, he told himself, that was enough. The rift spread before them like a bruise on the galaxy, a stretch of warped space where ships disappeared more often than they returned. He told her it would be fine, that he'd flown through worse. She didn't believe him, of course. Her ears twitched in quiet suspicion, and she sat in the co-pilot's chair with her arms crossed. "Last time you said we'd be fine," she reminded him. "We ended up upside down in a gravity well arguing with a customs officer who thought my ears were illegal weapons." "To be fair," he said, adjusting a lever that squeaked like a frightened mouse, "they do look sharp enough to cut through bureaucracy." She tilted one ear at him like a blade. "Careful. I know how to use them." The ship rattled as they entered the rift, the stars outside stretching into bizarre shapes, spiraling patterns that played tricks on the eye. The navigation computer began spouting poetry instead of coordinates, which was never a good sign. "Oh, vast eternity," the screen recited, "where longing bends." He smacked the console. "Stop flirting with me and just give me the course." The system beeped indignantly and shut down. She laughed softly, the glow in her eyes flickering brighter. "Your technology has a soul. A dramatic one. Don't encourage it," he muttered, banging at the controls until the ship grudgingly stabilized. The rift wasn't empty. Shapes drifted in the warped dark. Broken hulls of old freighters, shattered cruisers, even a luxury yacht spinning endlessly with its lights still flickering. He tried to play it cool, whistling a tune, but she saw the tension in his shoulders. "You've been here before," she said. "Once or twice. Usually by accident. Once while very drunk." "And how did that end?" "With a hangover, a stolen shuttle, and a marriage proposal from a lizard merchant who thought I was charming." She grinned. "Did you accept? I didn't look good in scales." The laughter eased the shadows pressing in, but the rift had a way of crawling under the skin. She grew quiet, her gaze fixed on the shifting patterns beyond the glass. Then she leaned forward, ears twitching sharply. "Something's following us." He glanced at the scanner. Static. Nothing. But she was rarely wrong about these things. He flipped a switch, and the long-range sensors groaned awake. A blip appeared, small but steady, pacing them. "Probably just a courier ship," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Or someone looking for me." The way she said it, calm but heavy, made him shift in his seat. He wanted to tell her she was safe with him, that no one would touch her secrets while he was around. But the words stuck in his throat, because he wasn't sure if he believed them himself. Instead, he said, "If they try anything, I'll unleash the ship's most dangerous weapon." Her eyes widened slightly. "You have weapons." "Of course," he said. "Weaponized bad singing. Works every time." She rolled her glowing eyes, but her smile returned. Hours dragged on. The shadowing ship never drew closer, never fell away. When they finally emerged from the rift, the fortress appeared on the far side, a sprawling construct of black metal that looked grown rather than built, like it had sprouted from the void itself. She went very still. That's not supposed to be here. He swallowed. Good news is, we found something rare. Bad news is, it's probably the kind of rare that gets you killed. The comm crackled alive before she could reply. A voice slithered through, metallic and sharp. Identify yourselves and prepare for boarding. He tried his usual tactic. This is the Mr. Outrunner. We're just passing through, carrying essential cargo. One crate of slightly used socks and a barrel of questionable pickles. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Then the voice said, "Dock at Bay 17. Resistance will not be tolerated." He turned to her with his best attempt at a reassuring grin. "See, they like pickles." Her ears flicked back. "They know me. That fortress belongs to my people's enemies." He felt his stomach twist. He could confess everything now. Admit that part of him had brought her here deliberately. That temptation had gnawed at him until he gave in. But the words stayed buried. Instead, he put on bravado like a suit of armor. "Then we bluff, we smile, and we get out before anyone notices we're here." "Easy. Easy," she echoed. "Well, easier than marriage to a lizard merchant." The docking clamps seized the ship with a jolt. The lights dimmed. He tried not to look at her glowing eyes, at the faint tremor in her voice when she whispered, "Why would they be waiting for me here?" And he tried not to think about the answer he didn't dare give. The docking bay swallowed them whole, clamps locking around the freighter with the tenderness of a predator hugging prey. He kept his hands steady on the controls, though his knuckles turned pale. She stood beside him, her ears angled forward, eyes glowing faintly, watching the bay doors close behind them. The fortress interior stretched out in layered walkways and towering machinery, all of it alive with humming energy. "Smile," he muttered. "Act natural." Her ears twitched. "I'm about to walk into the hands of my enemies. What's natural about that?" He grinned nervously. "Fine. Then act like you're shopping for fruit. Everyone relaxes when fruit is involved." A squad of armored figures marched into view, their helmets sharp and insectal. Their weapons hummed with power as they signaled for the ramp to lower. He exhaled slowly, then leaned toward her. "Remember, if they ask, you're my assistant, and I'm a famous traveling pickle salesman." She stared at him. "Pickles again? Everyone respects a good pickle merchant." The ramp hissed down, and the two of them descended with as much false confidence as he could muster. The guards surrounded them instantly, scanning them with beams of light that prickled against the skin. The leader, taller than the rest, tilted its head. "Cargo manifest," it demanded. He slapped the nearest crate. "Pickles. The finest in the galaxy. Slightly fermented, dangerously crunchy." A pause. Then, to his surprise, the guard actually opened the crate. The stench of brine filled the air. The leader turned back, helmet unreadable, but no alarm sounded. He gave her a smug glance. "See, saved by pickles." Her ears angled back in disbelief. "You actually brought them?" "I like to be prepared." They were escorted through a maze of corridors. The walls pulsed faintly, as if the fortress itself breathed. She walked with quiet grace, though he noticed her fists clenched tighter with every step. He wanted to say something reassuring, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he cracked the only armor he had: humor. "At least the decor's nice," he whispered, "if you ignore the ominous lighting and death squads." "Charming as always," she replied, though the corner of her mouth twitched. They were led into a vast chamber filled with machinery and a hovering platform at its center. Holographic displays spiraled overhead, showing star systems highlighted in crimson. The leader gestured for her to step forward. She didn't move, her glowing eyes fixed on the platform, then shifted to him. He knew she saw it, the truth, the deal he had struck, the betrayal written into the very air around them. Her voice cut the silence. "You brought me here." His chest tightened. The guard stirred, weapons humming louder, but her words hit harder than any blade. He tried to speak, but what came out was clumsy. It wasn't, "Look, it's complicated." Her laughter was sharp, bitter, but not without humor. "You're terrible at lying. I only ignored it because I wanted to believe you." The guards moved in, reaching for her, but she was faster. A sudden burst of light flared from her hands, energy rippling out and knocking the nearest soldier sprawling. Alarm screamed through the chamber. He ducked instinctively, pulling her down with him as plasma fire scorched the walls. "Okay, new plan," he shouted over the chaos. "Less talking, more not dying." She glared at him, but she didn't let go of his arm. Together, they sprinted toward a side passage as sirens wailed and the fortress shuddered under the weight of its own defenses. He fired wildly with a stolen blaster, hitting exactly nothing. "Your aim is appalling," she shouted, loosing another burst of energy that melted a doorway shut behind them. "Hey, I'm distracting them." "You're distracting me." They stumbled into a maintenance corridor, the walls alive with moving conduits that shifted like snakes. He tried to catch his breath, leaning against a panel that promptly shocked him. She raised an eyebrow. "Still confident in your plan?" He shook his stinging hand. "Absolutely. My plan was always improvise badly until something works." They pressed deeper into the fortress, pursued by echoing footsteps and bursts of gunfire. At one point, they ducked into a chamber filled with humming pods, each containing something alive, or once alive. She froze, staring at them with horror, before pulling him out quickly. "This is worse than I thought," she said quietly. He didn't ask. He could see enough in her glowing eyes to know. Explosions rattled the corridors as they ran, alarms blending into a maddening chorus. Somehow, through the chaos, she found time to smirk at him. "If we survive this, you're never choosing our destinations again." He grinned weakly. "Deal. Next trip, someplace quiet. Maybe a beach. No fortresses, no armies, just sand and bad cocktails. And no pickles." "Fine," he sighed. "No pickles." They reached a hangar at last, door sealed tight, guards already rushing in. She stood tall, energy sparking at her fingertips, ears angled forward like blades. He raised the useless blaster again, because even if he was a fool, he wasn't going to let her face this alone. And though he didn't say it, though the words stuck behind his teeth, he knew the truth now. He'd betrayed her once, but this time, no matter what, he'd fight with her until the end. The hangar shook with the force of battle. Guards poured in from every direction, weapons glowing, voices barking orders. He stood shoulder to shoulder with her, the useless blaster clutched in his hand, its barrel already smoking from too much panicked firing. She was a storm beside him, arcs of energy sparking from her hands, her glowing eyes brighter than he had ever seen. "This is where we die," he muttered. "Not if you stop missing everything you shoot at." She snapped back, unleashing a wave of light that sent enemies sprawling. He fired again. The bolt ricocheted, striking a ceiling pipe that promptly burst, spraying green gas across the room. The guards coughed, stumbled, and fell over one another in confusion. He blinked at the chaos. "See, strategy. That was an accident. I prefer the word innovation." They ran together, dodging plasma fire, ducking behind crates of supplies marked with alien symbols. One of them burst open when a stray bolt hit, spilling glowing fruit that rolled across the floor. A guard slipped on one, arms flailing before crashing into two others. "Weaponized groceries," he said, breathless. "Why doesn't every army use these?" She didn't answer, too focused on the massive doors ahead. They were sealed tight, reinforced with layers of shifting metal. She reached out, energy flaring in her palms. The structure groaned, strained, then cracked apart with a blinding flash. Beyond the door stretched the hangar's open bay, stars spilling in like scattered diamonds. Ships were docked in neat rows, but only one looked remotely flyable, a sleek craft with curved wings and an engine core that hummed with dangerous power. They sprinted for it, alarms shrieking louder, reinforcements flooding behind them. He slid into the pilot's seat while she sealed the hatch with another surge of energy. Systems roared to life, alien symbols flashing across the dashboard. "Can you fly it?" she asked. "Can I fly it?" "Absolutely." "Will I crash it?" "Also absolutely." The ship lifted violently, scraping against the hangar floor before blasting out into open space. The fortress shuddered behind them, explosions ripping through its black hull. Fleets clashed outside, Her people's ships arriving at last, streaks of light carving through enemy lines. He wrestled with the controls, muttering curses under his breath. "This thing handles like a drunken whale." "You're alive," she said. "That's an improvement." They wove through the battle, dodging bursts of plasma, weaving between collapsing cruisers. For a moment, everything was fire and light, chaos surrounding them on every side. Then the fortress imploded in a silent flash, fragments scattering into the void. The battlefield stilled. What remained of the enemy fled into the rift. Her people's ships moved to surround them, their designs elegant and alien, their weapons still glowing. She sat quietly beside him, her glowing eyes softer now, her long ears tilting toward him. "They'll want answers," she said. He nodded, staring at his hands on the controls. "I'll give them. All of it. No lies this time." She studied him, her gaze searching. "And when they ask why you betrayed me?" He swallowed, words heavy but certain. "Because I was a coward. Because I wanted something I thought mattered more than trust. And because I didn't understand what I had until I almost lost it." Silence stretched, broken only by the hum of the ship. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed. Not sharp or bitter this time, but quiet and genuine. "You humans," she said, shaking her head. "You ruin everything, then try to fix it with words." "Did it work?" he asked, hope sneaking into his voice. She turned toward the viewport, watching her people's fleet drift closer, their weapons still trained on the stolen craft. "It worked enough. For now." He released a shaky breath. It wasn't forgiveness, not completely. But it wasn't the end either. When her people boarded, they didn't drag him away in chains. She spoke for him, her voice calm, her glowing eyes steady. She told him the truth, his betrayal, his confession, his choice to stand with her when it mattered. They listened. Reluctantly, they let him live. Later, when the battle was only memory, the two of them stood together on the observation deck of a ship that felt far safer than his freighter ever had. She leaned on the railing, ears twitching at the sound of engines humming below. He stood beside her, unsure if he should speak. Finally, she broke the silence. "You changed. Not enough to erase what you did, but enough to prove you're more than what you were." He smiled faintly. "That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said about me." She turned, glowing eyes catching the starlight. "Don't make me regret it." He raised his hands in mock surrender. "No more betrayals. No more secret deals. And maybe fewer pickles." Her laughter filled the deck, light and unguarded, echoing into the stars. For the first time in a long while, he believed they might just survive whatever came next. Not because of lies or bargains, but because somehow, against all odds, trust could be rebuilt. And this time, he intended to deserve it. The end.